Okay, all right. Can you hear me? Can you hear me all right in the back? All right. Welcome, everyone. It's great to see such a large crowd here tonight. My name is Nicholas Manousis. I'm the president of the Horological Society of New York, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here to our February meeting. As usual, we'll get started with a couple announcements. Our education updates. We are going all over the place. Chicago coming up February 8th and 9th, and then we're flying all the way down to Australia for weekends in Melbourne, February 29th through March 1st. I was just watching the Australian Open and I realizing I mispronounce it, Melbourne, right? If I'm trying to be authentic here. And then back to San Diego, March 7th through the 8th. And we have one of our New York weekend classes, February 15th. And of course, the evening classes throughout the month of February. I also want to remind everyone that our inaugural loan exhibition is on view upstairs right now through May. It's highlights of the collection of Bob Frischman. I highly recommend it. It's a really esoteric collection, some really fun stuff. If you get a chance, come by and check it out. We're open Tuesday and Thursday afternoons for viewing the exhibition. And here's a picture of Bob in front of his exhibition. You may recognize him. He lectured here back in 2017. And keep your eye out. We're going to have a lot more exhibitions coming. I was just having a meeting earlier today, working on the schedule for the rest of the year. So this is something that we're really excited about and looking forward to working on. And of course, it's that time of year. It's that time of year to start talking about scholarship, about watchmaking scholarship. So the Henry B. Freed Scholarship applications are now being accepted through March 1st, so just this month. We're going to be making awards up to $10,000, and they will be announced at the gala. And that's a great segue, of course, to the 154th anniversary gala and charity auction. I think I recognize someone in the back of that photo there, kind of blurred out. So this is a photo from last year's gala. Tickets are now available. The gala is going to be Wednesday, April 1st, 2020. No, this is not an April Fool's joke. It's actually Wednesday, April 1st. Table reservations are available. There's just a few left. Tickets are going quickly. We're of course going to have the very, very fun charity auction hosted by Christie's. And if you'd like to purchase tickets or see more information, please see our website. Okay, and now with the gala, we have this video that we made from last year's gala, and it's kind of fun. It's a fun way to look back. If you've come for our lectures, you know our lectures are kind of buttoned up, formal academic affairs. The gala is something different. It's a big party. It's a lot of fun, and we raise a lot of money for a very good cause. So I'm really happy to debut this short trailer about the gala. Ed, if you can kill the lights, we'll take a look at this for a second. Yes, plug.
So I want to welcome everyone to our 153rd anniversary of the Horological Society of New York.
So tonight, I want to take a couple minutes and talk about watchmaking schools in the USA. Last year, in 2018, we had 10 full-time watchmaking schools in the country. In the fall of last year, the Oklahoma State School unfortunately closed. Overnight, we lost 10% of the potential watchmaking students in the country. And so the HSNY board came together. We needed to go beyond just scholarships to individual watchmaking students. What we decided to do is we're going to begin direct financial assistance to watchmaking schools. As an industry, we really cannot allow any more watchmaking schools in the country to have any financial issues at all. And if they do, we need to come together as a group, as a society, and make sure that we provide the help that we can. You're going to be bidding on lots of incredible watches and clocks and experiences tonight, but that's not all you're bidding on. You're bidding on how many of those checks we can give away next year, how many international speakers we can fly into New York to lecture. Keep it in mind as you're bidding, bid generously, enjoy the night, enjoy your dinner, and thank you, everyone.
we are very proud to award the Henry B. Freed Scholarship for Watchmaking students to 3 outstanding individuals.
Thank you for your bids. I'm selling the back at $3,300. Going once, going twice, and it is sold for $3,300. Thank you so much. For $1,200, it's here at 12. 14 will be next. $200, $300, $400, $500 in the back, $600 up front now. $600.
All right. So that's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to it myself, and I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of everyone that's here tonight at the gala coming up soon. Once again, that's Wednesday, April 1st. So coming up shortly. So tonight's lecture. Last year on HODINKEE, an article was published that talked about several World War II watches. Now, these watches weren't especially valuable. They weren't sold at auction. They weren't owned by any celebrities. They didn't have any special technical features with them. But what they did have are stories that really deserve to be told. And so tonight, we're going to go even deeper into those stories. We're very lucky to have the author of the article here with us, and he's brought a few watches as well. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Cole Pennington.
It doesn't matter. Good evening. I'd like to thank a few people before getting into this here, namely the Horological Society of New York. I've been a long-time admirer from afar and always gotten secret society vibes from this place. And now that I'm here, I can say it's not totally untrue. Also, I'd like to thank HODINKEE for allowing me to do what I do every day and really give me the room to carry out this project and so forth. And then, namely, all of you as well. So thank you for the enthusiasm coming out here on a busy night and listening. So we'll get into this here. But before we do, who is a first-time visitor here at these lectures? Great, yeah, good amount of folks. HSNY members cannot answer this question, but I'd like to ask you a quick question here. Do you know who owns this building and who bought it in 1899? Some of the first-timers here. Who backs this place? Anybody? Yes, that is true. The General Society does back this place. And how did you know that? That's cheating. But for anyone else, yeah, so literally, right when you were walking in, on your left, there was a plaque. The plaque goes into the history of everything. So right there, the answer is in front of us. There was a fellow named Roman Mars, who's behind 99% Invisible, who started this project called Always Read the Plaque, which I thought was great. All around the built world, there are little clues to a larger story, and we often just walk right by them, don't even think twice about it. So, if you can see here, that's the plaque right out there that you probably walked by without even thinking about and didn't glance twice. So if we apply that to watches, always read the plaque, I'd like to introduce this idea of always reading the case back, because that's where all these stories generate from. A lot of watches, there's plenty of scholarship out there and so forth, and we know the history, it's been passed on, but we don't know the personal histories of these watches, and the case back often gives us clues. So this whole thing started with an article, as Nick sort of introduced there. This article here, the whole idea was, here are these watches, they have engravings, what can we do with it? And that was published. Who read the article by any chance? All right, maybe like half-ish. So we'll kind of breeze through some of the things that were already published, and we'll get into some new things that have developed since then. But before that, I think there is something interesting to consider and to address and talk about before talking about World War II watches, or even watches in general. We could take a moment here, read this quote by Eisenhower, who was the commander of the Expeditionary Force during World War II. In this community, in watches in general, this hobby, I've been involved in it since teenage years and so forth. I think we have a tendency to fetishize the watches and see them as a main character or a protagonist in a story of good versus evil, and there's this kind of like we worship these military watches, and oftentimes we don't really think about the circumstances that they came to us in, or just the circumstances surrounding them. The best estimate, or the least amount of people who died during World War II is 60 million, but it's more like 85. And I would say it's probably even higher than that, considering that we didn't count a lot of deaths. So it's important to consider this before we take a look at these watches and really dig into them. We have to consider how they came to us and the circumstances that they were used in first. War isn't always black and white. It's, of course, there's a large gray area. And I think the first time I got that, it was very interesting. My grandfather in Mississippi told me a story. When he was a kid, a German POW who was injured came and knocked on his childhood house where he grew up, knocked on the door. My great-grandmother, his mother, said, "We'll let him stay for the night. He was injured. Let him stay for the night, sleep." This is during World War II. And I thought, no, what the heck? Letting potentially a Nazi soldier, a former Nazi, a POW now, come sleep in your house overnight? What are you, nuts? Then I was like, nah, that can't be true. Then, sure enough, get older, start learning to do some little research here and there, find out there was a POW camp right down the way in Brookhaven, Mississippi, and the Army Corps of Engineers often took those POWs and assigned them tasks around the area, terraforming the Mississippi River, cutting trees down and so forth, and this guy was injured because he was cutting trees down. Did a little more research. It turns out that camp specifically wasn't mainly Nazis. What they would do is anytime a fight broke out between a hardcore Nazi and just simply a German soldier, they would take the Nazi, ship him off to Oklahoma, and separate him. And there's multiple accounts of these soldiers coming back to backwoods Mississippi, where backwoods Mississippi, life isn't like it is here. The amenities aren't as rich and so forth. They look back and they say, in a way, it saved my life. The fact that they were POWs there, and a lot of them decided to stay on board and work here in America after the war was over, which is fascinating. It just goes to show you that it's never really black or white. Yes, there are some unequivocal evils involved in this story, but in general, there's more to it. There's incredible nuance involved with these stories, and I think that little personal story really illustrates that as well. We're getting into World War II watches, but to do that, we have to start with World War I. So these are what's known as trench watches. The British were the first to use watches on the wrist. Prior to this, it was all pocket watches. Really, the Boer Wars were the first, but World War I was when they proliferated and most people had a wristwatch. Some interesting things to note here. This 12 is in red. The reason that is because prior to this, the crown was usually at 12. So when you take a watch and you orient it with the crown at 3 on your wrist, you can easily misconstrue the 9 o'clock position for 12. So they made 12 red in order to help orient, so people can understand that this is 12 now. And these covers here that you'll see on the next one are for shrapnel. Nowadays we use sapphire, crystal mainly. The first sapphire watch was the JLC Duo Plan in 1929, so this is prior to that. This is all mineral glass, so it's a little less impervious to damage. So they had these covers on them that would also protect from shrapnel. Because what changed from wars of the past to World War I was the advent of trench warfare. Soldiers getting in and out of the trenches. It was no longer, the stuff you see in the Civil War, Revolutionary War movies where they line up and all fire at the same time. It wasn't. It was chaos. There was a very good film last year called They Shall Not Grow Old, which kind of illustrates that. Has anyone seen that here? Yeah, a few folks. So for everyone else, this is a little taste of what trench warfare was like. I think it really illustrates it. So that gives you a little taste of that's real footage. That footage was colorized and voice actors voiced over what you saw there. It was the real deal right there. So it's a primary account of what trench warfare was like. And these are the case backs of some of the watches that were used in that style of warfare. The one on the right, it says USAS. So back then it was the Air Service, prior to the Army Air Corps, which is now the Air Force. France, 1917. So for folks who can't see it in the back. The one on the left is inscribed with L. Taggart in Poiseret, France. I might not be pronouncing that correctly, but Poisier, there you are. And so this is all to illustrate that the idea and practice of inscribing the case backs of military watches goes back to the beginning. Nowadays, not done as much. Obviously, the current service members wear G-Shocks and so forth, but even during Vietnam, you could walk into the PX, buy a watch, and you would often put your serial number, name, where you were as either a memento or, worst case scenario, to help ID should something go wrong, which is why folks did it back in World War I. And the coolest thing about it is that it leaves folks like us a trail of breadcrumbs to follow. I think that's, in my mind, when you do that as a soldier, you must have some idea that things can go wrong and so forth, and you might do it just for the sake of posterity, at the very least. And for us, that's important to consider, and really it allows us to look into the history of these watches. So the whole story starts, oddly, with an airplane. This is Quit Your Bitchin', and it's a P-51D Mustang. You can tell by the bubble canopy here. And this plane does tours of the world, but mainly the US, the country. So I heard that it was flying at this air show in Reading, Pennsylvania, called World War II Day. Didn't know what it was, just knew that this guy was going to be there. And who's seen one of these fly before? All right, they're majestic. I mean, folks talk about the Spitfire, very, very similar. Uses a Merlin engine. The one here in America was built by Packard in Detroit on license from the Brits, but they sound incredible, they're agile, they're beautiful to go see. So I went to go see this plane fly. That was the main objective. That's what it started out as. And kind of was quickly immersed in this reenactment culture, which these guys, they're so detail-oriented. That's a Japanese soldier and a KMT, a Kuomintang soldier, which went on, actually in HODINKEE magazine, volume 5, there's a story about CIA and civil air transports backed operations in China, dealing with the Chinese nationalists, and that's the KMT, so the gray suit you see there. But what's interesting is, if you just look at the level of detail these people go to really, really nail it. So this is like ultimate geekery, kind of like a Red Bar event or HSNY, right? I mean, really, these guys get down to the details, which is very, very cool to see. This is a little video I captured, which I was just like, wow, these guys, they're really into it.
Hostiles at 11 o'clock. Fire!
So to an outsider, it just looks like a bunch of folks getting together to shoot blanks. And so it was like, all right, this is interesting. So since they go down to the detail, there is a market to fill. They're not necessarily watch people, but they want to be as accurate as possible. So wandering around the whole fairgrounds, I come across, we all probably have it in this room, like a homing beacon on watches. So I come across this guy selling World War II watches. This is his collection. This is Army Ordnance Watch, which we'll get into in a second, but he's there strictly to sell watches to reenactors. He's been collecting for a long time. He's there to fill a specific hole in the market. He's not necessarily a watch guy, but hoards them. And so again, this is the Army Ordnance Watch. We'll quickly go over it here. There are two main watches which we'll go over, which he had that day. Army Ordnance Watch is the lesser of two. This was technical things, so non-pilots. So the A11, which we'll talk about next, went to pilots and Navy and so forth. But this watch handed out to infantry, basic roles, enlisted soldiers, and so forth. Hamilton, Waltham, Bulova, and Elgin produced this watch. The ways to quickly identify it: white dial, sub-seconds at 6 o'clock, and for the technical side, a lot of them are 7 joules, could be as high as 25, some are 15. They're not great quality watches, but these were widespread. It's what everyone used. This here, we have it. This is the technical manual for these watches that the Army issued to soldiers as well. So what's in here, which I thought was very cool, is you know those troop transport Dodge power wagons. They have a big canvas tent on the back and so forth. They actually had one of those with mobile watchmaking stations in it, which would go on the front lines too, to repair watches during the fight. So imagine 2 watchmakers' benches side by side inside the back of a troop transport. So that's how important watches were. That's a testament, really. Like, we know that prior to the advent of quartz and so forth, we relied on mechanical watches, really the advent of cell phones and so forth. But in order to win the war, we needed to be on time. So the next watch the guy had was the A11, which is known as the watch that won the war. You can immediately tell in here there are some look-alike A11s and some non-A11s, but there are definitely some here, 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 this row here. The specs on these guys, these were only filled by Elgin, Waltham, and Bulova. And calibrated, they were accurate watches. They were a cut above what you normally got. And in addition, you see some of them here some have sweep seconds. A lot of these are 6 o'clock sub-dial seconds, but one of the specifications is sweep seconds as well. World War II watches overall. How many folks own them here in this room? Not many. Not many at all. 1 or 2, yeah. Like, in terms of collecting, they're not really desirable because they're A, small, so they're not very wearable. They're not very valuable, and a lot of them have been through hell and back, so they don't run right, and they're incredibly hard, A, to find. So there's a little pinion that's on the Bulova A11 that is impossible to find. The VAT is worth more than a lot of these watches that are junked. So the cost to service them, to get them running right, is way higher. If you say the average time only cost to service between $150 and $300, these watches are like oftentimes below $100. So it doesn't really make sense to collect them. And because of that, they're all over, and they're easily accessible. In addition, the knowledge and enthusiasm is going away because the folks who wore these watches and who it meant something to simply aren't around anymore. And historically, I mean, kids these days, they just don't care, right? So the general enthusiasm and interest in World War II is certainly fading. So in order to kind of combat the situation, or really like tonight what we're doing is raise enthusiasm and share enthusiasm around them, I think the best way to do that is to, A, get people interested in it through talks like this, but get them to folks who find them intrinsically valuable already, mainly for their historical significance. And I was thinking, well, we'll get into that in a minute. So the guy who I bought these from, usually all these watches were running. The ones that he gave or he had for sale in the case, they were all running perfectly. He paid $45 to have them serviced, which is crazy if you've gone to service a watch recently. It's a lot more than that. But the guy who did all of his servicing passed away. He was a vet, so he was doing this in period. So that day, I walked away with a Hamilton. So I purchased a Hamilton with a case back engraving simply because I thought it was interesting. Go home, ruminate on it, and start really getting into it, type a few things in Google. I thought, wow, there's something here. And the guy told me he had a lot more watches than what was at the show there. So I hit him up and I went to his house in rural Pennsylvania and said, well, what do you got? And he said he had amassed this collection over 40 years, back when, this is pre-eBay and so forth, where he was buying shoe boxes full of World War II watches for dollars. And I went through them all, and I looked for two things: personal engravings and anything that stood out. And it wasn't all Army Ordnance NA-11. It was a mix of private purchase watches as well, which are watches that are purchased outside the military, which are then used in service and often engraved. So I went through this to give you an idea. This is what he presented to me. And I apologize for vertical video. This was really a schoolboy error, but this is the amount of watches here that he has is crazy. Some private purchase up there on the top left. So you can imagine going through all those. I came away with these. So I looked through them all, looked for the ones with engravings, paid whatever for them, which was not much actually. So said, give me all the watches you have that have engravings. Because I was thinking, when I was looking at it the first time, I was thinking, one of my grandfathers served in the New Jersey National Guard as a medical officer. The other fought in Korea. Grew up hearing stories about, what it's like to do medical exercises upstate New York, what it's like to hear howitzer shells flying by, digging out foxholes in freezing cold weather. I was thinking, what were they wearing? That was the first thought. What kind of watches were they wearing? I was thinking, wouldn't it be interesting if I could see that watch again, or learn about it, or maybe potentially reunite this person, like my own relatives, with the watches they wore. And the thought occurred to try and do that with the watches that I found. There was enough information on that I could kind of piece something together. Because watches, as we all know, they're incredibly personal. They not only keep time, but they mark time, right? Real watch idiot savant folks tie moments in their life to watches. Maybe you get married, you buy a nice watch, so forth. So I was thinking that this would be the direction of the project. Flip them all over. These are all the case-back engravings. I'm not an academic or a historian, just a guy who writes about watches. You can read writing on HODINKEE. So I didn't take the approach of a very serious scholar, more of an enthusiast. And the intention was really never to write a story either. This was just a personal project. Thought it'd be a fun way to pass some time and do something meaningful and interesting. And really, folks back then, they didn't call them the greatest generation for no reason. They deserve to be remembered in a certain way, and I think the intersection of my personal interests in horology and so forth, and the reverence for those folks intersected here. So the first watch that I pulled out and did a little research on was this Elgin here. Elgin, Illinois, great American watchmaker. Not around anymore, unfortunately. But something interesting you might notice is that the lume looks too new to be original when the rest of the dial looks like it's been through a bomb blast or something. Something to think about with World War II watches that's always interesting is that the lume, and it goes through this in the instruction manual, there are instructions on how to relume the watch. So nowadays when you get relume dials and so forth to boost the value of the watch, unlike whatever Daytonas or popular collector watches, not the case with World War II watches. When they're relumed, chances are they were relumed because they had to be used. Some details here. Not worth getting into the radium debate. I'm not a scientist, so it's not really worth talking about that, but general consensus is, don't keep them in contained environments. But as you can see, these, plenty of radium. This is the interesting part. Can anyone read that? I know a few people must be able to. Gary, can you read that? Yeah, exactly. So the heroic people of the USSR, Russian War Relief USA, which is a transliteration. Off the bat, so obviously, I thought this might have been weird, right? Elgin watch, American, with Russian on the back. I wrote this story up too, so we'll kind of breeze through this, but weird, right? Why is that? Do some research, and it turns out that this is a watch from something called the Russian War Relief, which was an organization here in New York City, founded in 1941. Some folks say that the Lend-Lease agreement was the instrument that the Russian War Relief Foundation used to get these watches over to Russia. I don't think that's true. There's nothing that seems like one of these old time zone rumors or something that just get repeated after, years and years. Doubt it's true. I think they were just sent over there. Why? Well, the founder, hard to see here. The chairman is Alan Wardwell. Harvard Law grad, then he worked at the Red Cross in Russia, then became the vice president of the American-Russia Chamber of Commerce in 29, then eventually went to the Russian War Relief. I think he had enough connections to get this watch to Russia anyway, without Lend-Lease. And this letter right here is to Herbert Lehman. Lehman Brothers. We all know that story. So that doesn't exist, just like the Russian War Relief Foundation doesn't exist anymore either. So that's the story with that I kind of uncovered, which I thought was incredibly interesting. So during World War II, we have an organization sending watches to the Soviet Union, not Russia, to help in the fight against the Nazis. Incredibly fascinating. And these are some of the advertisements that the Russian War Relief put out. These are from the Art Institute of Chicago. There was an exhibit on this, so that's where these are all from. Very interesting. Things that you don't typically think about when you think about early days of World War II. Next watch I pulled out. This one also was featured in the article. Active Service. So Active Service is actually a Swiss-made brand. But this one was issued. It's nice. It's a brevet case there. It wasn't issued. It was to, you can take a look there. This is what it says. What's interesting, a few things. A, if you look here, stainless steel, which is not typically used during wartime. To Lieutenant A.C. Jones, Royal Canadian Navy Reserve, from the Royal Sovereign Sea Cadet Corps in Sault Ste. Marie in 1941. This one was easy. This is the easy one of the bunch. Plug in A.C. Jones Canada or A.C. Jones Royal Canadian Navy Reserve into Google Books. And some logs. It was Google Scholar, actually, which combs through the books, the JSTOR type things, databases, and so forth. One little thing came up. One line right here. A.C. Jones in command. So scroll down and look at where these are held. Like, what if I wanted to get a copy of this and read the rest of the book and so forth? Turns out they were held in a museum up in Canada. Any Canadians here, by the way? I know one. All right. So up in Canada, in Oakville, which is in Ontario, there is a museum dedicated to all things Oakville, like many small towns have these museums. And we'll get into why that's important in a second. So I called up the museum, said, hey, I got this weird project. I found a watch. It has something to do with you guys and this battleship that may have been docked there and this guy, A.C. Jones. And the lady, typical Canadian, incredibly nice. Oh, yeah, I know just the person, and so forth. So she connects me to this guy named Sean Livingston, who is currently a Naval Reserve officer. And he quite literally, wrote the book on the Oakville. So here I got quickly connected with the guy who might know the story and might be able to piece this whole thing together. That's our guy. That's A.C. Jones. So working with Sean, we went through and got the rest. We pieced together the story, got the rest of the archival documents. And this specific picture was when the ship was being commissioned in Oakville. So it was commissioned on November 18th, 1941, and it was named after the town of Oakville. You can see here. HMCS, Her Majesty's Canadian Ship, Oakville. USS is United States ship, of course. So that is the mighty Oakville, which A.C. Jones was the captain of. So imagine that. Like, imagine turning over the back of this watch, and then all of a sudden you have a Canadian National Heroes watch. Wow, that's kind of cool, you know. Dig into a little bit more, and Sean Mr. Livingston put forth a theory that This watch was gifted, so it says to from the Sovereign Sea Cadet Corps, right? The Oakville, once it was commissioned, paraded around these northern Canadian waterways and so forth and stopped in at various naval bases. The theory is that during one of these, they do parade inspections. So all the Sea Cadet Corps, they line up, stay stiff, don't break formation, and A.C. Jones would come around and inspect and also greet, boost morale, and so forth. So the idea was that this watch must have been given to him by the Sea Cadet Corps during an inspection in Sault Ste. Marie. If you look here, this is just a current map of the waterways of Canada. And what I think must have happened, the theory we put forth with Mr. Livingston, Thunder Bay is where Port Arthur is, which is where, in the logs, the Oakville started its journey out to the Atlantic. So it must have been commissioned in Oakville, which should be down near Toronto, maybe around here somewhere. Windsor, yeah, near Toronto. Went Thunder Bay, stopped in Sault Ste. Marie on its way out to battle. The ship participated in the Battle of the Atlantic, ferrying, it was a Flower-class boat, so ferrying, going back and forth the Atlantic Sea, Atlantic Ocean, and it was never really meant for a transatlantic duty. It was meant to stay in these waterways. So it was kind of like a fish out of water, even though it was a boat in the water, but basically it shouldn't have been out there. It was a sitting duck. Did take on a little bit of damage. Then A.C. Jones transfers command of the ship. He, in his personal logs, he goes into this like crippling seasickness. So he got so seasick that he needed to transfer command of the boat. And that's crazy for a naval captain of the ship. But that's why. That's why he came home. He needed to stay on land. He transferred command of the ship. And unfortunately, that's when the story gets really exciting, after he transfers command. The ship goes down to the Caribbean to do U-boat patrols. So it's looking for U-boats along with American forces. So a PBY, probably, it only says PBY in the register, but it's probably a Catalina, was looking for U-boats, dropped a charge and a flare to signal to the Oakville that there was potentially a U-boat here. That charge brought the U-boat to the surface. The Oakville went over and rammed it, physically rammed it. So full steam ahead, bashed the side of the U-boat, then dropped another depth charge, went back, rammed it again, dropped another depth charge, and eventually the U-boat was inoperable. The crew ended up scuttling it and surrendering to the Canadians. So that's when the story gets really, really exciting, unfortunately after A.C. Jones handed command over. But very cool, very exciting that there's a connection there, and we're easily able to piece that together through A, friendly Canadians, and B, the inscription on the back of the case. So the original plan, so up here, this is the Oakville Museum at Urchlis Estate. Looks like a beautiful place. It's a historic museum that it's all things Oakville. And A.C. Jones and his relatives Canadian records, as an aside, Canadian records are very hard because the privacy laws aren't like, the camaraderie and celebration of the military and so forth isn't quite what it is here. Records aren't as easy to obtain. So the next best thing I thought would be to go to donate this to the museum that I called, because someone will appreciate it. It's a piece of history in Oakville. So a while back, I did a Talking Watches episode with Dr. David Williams, which was in, Hamilton, Ontario. So you fly into Toronto, go to Hamilton. It's at the Canadian Warbird Heritage Museum. And the idea was to pass through Oakville and hand deliver the watch. Never made it. Didn't make it on that drive, unfortunately, because the museum was closed. So I sent it to them, and it's up there, and it's on display. I get emails from Sean every now and then, get emails from the lady who originally connected me to him. And that was I thought that was an appropriate solution for this watch. So that's where it is right now. So that concludes the story of that guy. The next watch, another Elgin. This is an Army Ordnance Watch, so the first variety that we talked about. Usually they say Army Ord Dep on the case back. Instead, this one had an engraving. We had the guy's name, W.H. Croner. He was a lieutenant. U.S. Navy, we had his naval number. Navy records, kind of difficult to work with. At the time I wrote the article, this watch I couldn't get very far with. I knew that it was involved in World War II because of the serial number and when those serial numbers were issued to sailors, but that's about as far as we got. Then something kind of interesting happened. Posted the article, it was like on a Friday or something. Traffic is not great on Fridays. So few folks saw it, few folks read it. The next week I got an email with a few little, an anonymous email. Some guy said, "Hey, I like what you're doing," and so forth, and thought I would kind of point you in the right direction. And he did. He gave me a little trail to follow. And it started here with Boy's Life magazine. A 1926 issue of Boy's Life. And this section here is one of the spreads. It's about Boy Scouts. Huge. These days, I mean, Boy Scouts aren't a huge thing, but back then, massive. And in that, a young man writes a letter. In operating a wireless transmitter, do you shoot your current out on the aerial? If so, how do you get your return circuit? Scout Waldo Croner. So you can glean a little information from this, that he was, I picture, I mean, who knows if this is true, but I picture a young man, a scout, outdoorsy, interested in something technical. He's sitting outside, fumbling with a radio. And that's the first time Waldo Croner turns up in any sort of capacity in archival records, 1926, when he was a Boy Scout. Later on, he appears on the muster roll of the USS Marblehead. We'll talk about the Marblehead in a second, but what's most interesting, I think the important bit of information here is right here, the enlistment date. So now we have a confirmed enlistment date, August 5th, 1938, for Mr. Croner. That same day, he was from Idaho, and we'll get into how we found that in a second, but he was from Idaho, so I went back and looked at the local paper there on that same day. So what was the world like? Specifically, what was Idaho like in 1938, August 5th? New York Roars Heroes Welcome to Daring Flyer. That is a guy named Douglas Corrigan, who did a few things, but he did a cross-country journey, but he also was one of the builders of the Spirit of St. Louis, so that's pretty significant. In addition, Navy abandoned search for lost Hawaii Clipper. So the same day that this guy signs up for the Navy, there are headlines about Clippers going missing, which is interesting. So think about the times. There's an aviator being celebrated from flying across the country, and a Navy ship goes missing. Something kind of cool is that even in modern times, we still have, it's reversed, right? We have an airplane going missing, MH371, and we also have a Navy ship, the Zumwalt, that purposefully goes missing. This thing it's a stealth destroyer. So just kind of funny to think about how the times have changed, but they also really haven't. This is the Marblehead, the ship that he was assigned to. This is in 1935, sitting in San Diego. So now we have the ship he's assigned to. We know he's on that ship, so we can look up the history of that specific ship. So here is the important bit. Relations between the United States and Japan had reached such a critical state that movement of men, war was indicated. This meant the ship was now assigned to the South Pacific. They would be doing routine patrols and so forth, because there was obviously some tension between America and Japan. So it went to Borneo, is specifically where it went to. That's an island. Half of it now is Malaysian, half is Indonesian. It's east of the Malaysian peninsula. Large island. So you think about it, Croner signs up for the Navy, gets on the ship that's headed down to the South Pacific. He's in the South Pacific. What happens next? Pearl Harbor, which, of course, escalates things. It creates a truly global war, with America declaring war on Japan, of course, but now having an enemy off the West Coast and the East Coast this is basically when it hits the fan. You get into a little Charlie Foxtrot situation here. Pearl Harbor happens. The ship quickly gets drawn into the Battle of the Makassar Strait. So this is the intelligence report on what happened. I mean, this is kind of difficult to understand. This is just but I'll explain it here. First, what happens? Japanese fighter takes aim at the ship, comes in, fires, so engages. Then, 7 minutes later, a group of bombers approach the ship, the Marblehead, drop 3 bombs. 2 are direct hits that cause significant damage. 1 is a near miss. It explodes nearby, but that's the bad one because that hit the water and did damage to the hull, the side of the boat. So during that encounter, you can see some of the damage here documented. Marblehead. One of these guys could be Croner. We don't know. Unfortunately, we don't know what Croner looks like. So this boat makes the necessary repairs, and it kind of limps home. So Borneo goes over to Ceylon, which is present-day Sri Lanka, changed in 1972. Then goes over to Durban. So keep in mind, the ship is not at its best. It's getting repairs along the way till it gets repaired enough to make this voyage all the way to Brooklyn Navy Yard. So think about that. A guy is in a crazy firefight, the Battle of Makassar Strait, limps home to America. He's from West Coast, Pacific Northwest, so forth, and ends up in Brooklyn. Now, remember, we knew that he was a lieutenant, which that's kind of important to consider. Because you have to ask, how did he get to be a lieutenant? For that, you need a college degree, but there were no education records at the time. But he turns up on one of these rolls. Again, I know it's hard for folks to see, but there he is. Waldo Croner right there. Turns up there as a lieutenant. No records indicate why. So he must have either done something incredible while he was over there, or gotten an education at some time. Report of changes. So now, after that, he's assigned to the President Jackson. You see him right here. Does some duties on the President Jackson. The President Jackson actually never set sail. It stayed in port. Then, finally, so my theory, what we can kind of surmise from this is that he may have gotten an education during this time, is my guess. So again, this is where this whole thing gets very interesting. So he gets reassigned to the President Hayes, another ship. But if we look, he was detached and sent on the USS Telamon. Now the Telamon, that gets very interesting. The Telamon was involved with Operation Crossroads. Is anyone familiar with that? So there's Trinity nuclear tests that happened out in the desert. Then there were obviously the use of nuclear force to end the war. And then the third thus far, there have been tests since then, but the third thus far, that was during Operation Crossroads. So these ships sailed to the Bikini Atoll in the Marshall Islands and set up a test. One nuclear bomb was dropped, one was set underwater. And ironically, this is also where the inspiration for Godzilla came from. These tests. These exact tests, actually. So this ship, the Telamon, was there preparing to participate in Operation Crossroads. Then it sailed, right before the actual test happened, it sailed to a neighboring island in the Grand Marshall Islands. So Bikini Atoll is Grand Marshall Islands. And this is to give you an idea of what Operation Crossroads was like. Also, there's some good watch spotting here, so keep your eye out in the first second or two. This is what it was. Very interesting.
But damage was nowhere near that created by the following underwater blast known as Shot Baker.
That's what I was talking about with sensitivity towards making it look heroic, you know. So, think about this. You get in a real battle, a firefight in the South Pacific, and then you witness one of the few nuclear tests to have ever happened on the planet. Think about what Waldo Croner must have seen. I mean, that's pretty incredible to see these two things back to back. Next time he turns up is in one line of text in a newspaper. Waldo Croner, 51, retired naval officer, dies. He's buried in a national cemetery, so you can easily look up where he is and find a picture of the grave. That's all digitized stuff. These are easy archives to access. And a few interesting things here. This is the Willamette National Cemetery in Portland. World War II, we have those records. Those records are also publicly available. Korea is not as easy. So we know he was in World War II. We know he was in Korea only from the gravestone. That's it, the headstone. PH. PH stands for Purple Heart. So he was given a Purple Heart Award. What that means is being wounded or killed in any action against an enemy of the United States or as a result of an act of such enemy or opposing armed forces. So also, if we see here, he died at 51 years old. Was given a Purple Heart. This is not proven. I don't know. We don't have the medical records, but maybe something happened during a service and so forth that gave him an injury that maybe, we do know that he died at a VA hospital. So who knows? Who knows what happened? But that's the story of Walter Croner. Here's why I'm telling it to you now, too, is because he was never married, no kids. His story literally ends at this headstone. So a crazy story of seeing the nuclear test, going from Borneo to Sri Lanka, Ceylon, South Africa, getting a degree, all this entire life story just ends right here. I can't give the watch back to anybody, unfortunately. No surviving next of kin. So I still have that watch. You can come and check it out after the talk if you'd like. It's up here. Unsure what to do with it. Because literally it ends right there. And it's unfortunate, but crazy to think how much the story that's in that medal, because of that one line of text, what we can learn about Waldo Croner. Next watch. This really slick Hamilton from Lancaster in our backyard. Nowadays, Hamilton, owned by Swatch Group, still make great watches. But back then, they were American-made, of course. Really nice patina, some spotting on the dial. It's just a really good-looking watch. Roman numerals, which, by the way, aren't the reason we don't use Roman numerals in military applications is because they're actually very difficult to read. So that alone is odd that we have Roman numeral watch and used in a military application. How do we know it's used in a military application? Because of the caseback engraving in the back. Lieutenant G.C. Fullenkamp, best wishes from your Fed, Mock, and Welder Co. friends. Again, this one wasn't easy, but it was easy to get started. So I did a simple Google for Fed, Mock, and Welder, and found this. Ah, there you go. That's the caseback engraving. Found this. This is an advertisement for Federal Machine and Welder Company in Warren, Ohio, USA, manufacturer of electric welders. So that's what they were specialized in, welders that you actually operated with a foot pedal here and a current would go through here and create the weld. Prior to this, I guess, was, acetylene or gas-powered welders and so forth. So this was it was ahead of its time. One of their main clients was Dodge, actually. So, all right, now we know where Federal Machine and Welder Company is, which is right here in Trumbull County, Ohio. So we got a county and a town with that, and we got a rough time frame of the year. If it's World War II, we can look up the census data from Trumbull County. And sure enough, I mean, what's funny to me is this is the census data from an entire county. That. And so that makes it easy. There's a line of text right here. Fullenkamp, George. Experimental welding was his occupation. We got our guy. This is him. So we know his first name is George, and Christopher is his middle name, but comes from South Dakota, currently lives in Trumbull, Ohio. Warren is in Trumbull. So now we have a match. We know his name's George Christopher Fullenkamp. We know that he is a welder in Ohio. Plug his name in. It's not G.C. Fullenkamp anymore, it's George Christopher Fullenkamp. He appears in a 1936 yearbook for the University of South Dakota, which you see here, this is where did you come from, the previous residence, South Dakota. So we can gather that he went to school in South Dakota now because we have University of South Dakota yearbook. And this is most likely, remember, he was a lieutenant again. This is probably where he received his commission to make him a lieutenant. And he's under Company B. So my guess is this is like an early ROTC program or something. Why didn't he go right into the military after school? Don't know. Maybe it was a summer job. Maybe he was, trying to make some extra cash. Maybe he didn't need to. But either way, we know that he was in the military. He was also a welder. Then everything goes dark. No World War II records for him, which is totally weird and not really sure why. Again, a lot of this stuff is very difficult to find. But he does pop up again. This time he's a little older. It's not the Boy Scout, Oh, that was Croner, but it's not the young man welding and so forth. He is a teacher. You can see his right here. George Fullenkamp, University of South Dakota, AB, Math and Driver's Education, Bangor, Maine. Driver's Ed. So that's probably what he taught. This is at something called the Hartford Academy, Heartland Academy in Maine, and undated. So he pops up again, but another database gives us a little bit more of the picture. So here we see most important stuff is, the inscription on his gravestone. South Dakota, where he's from, Lieutenant Colonel, U.S. Army, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and Purple Heart, again. So it's a real shame that we can't get any of those records. Vietnam records are nearly impossible from open databases and so forth. But World War II, don't know. We just don't know where his records are. That's all we can get. Even got his social security number, which I kind of blacked out here. But we know he was in the Army. We know he was a lieutenant colonel. So that's like 05. That's a high-ranking officer. So kind of a big deal, actually. And again, we got, all the wars in modern history here. World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. So really incredible person. Tried to find the next, it's not on here, but he did have a wife. Unfortunately, his wife also passed away. So what I want to know is, what can we learn about his World War II, Korea, and Vietnam service? To do that, in progress now, a FOIA request is already in. So those things, has anyone done a FOIA here? Yeah, they can take a long time. And if you don't stay on top of it, this and that, other things, HODINKEE, writing every day. So have a FOIA request in for that. I requested all documents on them. Muckrock helps with that. We can use archives.gov. We could also use these two guys, which I have. And we'll get into this in a little bit. But first, so that's a lot of the new information since that article was written. Neither of those watches, both those watches had a dead end. And then due to an email, we got a little bit more information. So Fulham Camp is still a work in progress. The next thing, I mean, these are either dead ends or I'm still working on them. I know we're running up on time here, so we'll go through these, but very interesting. So this beautiful Elgin Deluxe, turn it over. This is my favorite case-back engraving, personally. I think it looks incredible. The designer at HODINKEE, Ian, I gave it to him and said, what do you think about this? And so forth. And he pointed out a few things which were interesting. Today, watches case-backs are laser engraved. Back then, they were all hand engraved. So you see, there's very shallow lines to make up this font. Interesting serifs. You could tell it was done by hand. I mean, this is also, it's a thematic thing of everything from The Greatest Generation, right? Things were made to last. Things were made by hand. Consumerism wasn't what it is today. So, to Pike Beale from coworkers, Edgewood Arsenal, 1942. Also, I know some of my coworkers are in the audience today, and I just wanted to remind them that this tradition of giving watches to your coworkers, I'm open to it. We can bring that back if you want. I did actually look up how much Elgins were, and they were $49.99, which is around $700 to $800 today. So I was thinking, if I walked in the office tomorrow and someone said, Cole, for all your hard work, here's an $800 watch, I would accept it. Just saying. But on to the not so good thing about this. Edgewood Arsenal is now Aberdeen Proving Grounds, which is in northern Maryland. The reason I didn't go very far with this is because Edgewood Arsenal, some not so great things happened there. It was where the Army Chemical Corps of Engineers performed a lot of tests that were not great. So basically, there, they tested more than 4,000 poisonous substances. I'll just summarize this for you. It was the largest poison gas facility on Earth, and at its height produced 200,000 units of chemical weapons per day, which is kind of crazy. And there are a lot of reports, again, in the archives. I didn't pull them because I think no one's coming here to see grotesque images, but there are medical reports of the accidents that happened, and there are people who are maimed and so forth. And Edgewood Arsenal, not a great place, so I still have the watch. Pike Beale, there are very few records, and I think that's because Pike Beale must have been a civilian contractor. That's mostly what Edgewood Arsenal was full of. Civilian contractors, scientists, and so forth. So that watch, you can come see that too. This guy. Super, super interesting. On a bond clip bracelet, which, very cool bracelet, by the way. I think that the coolest part about this watch, aside from the case back, is the bracelet. They were made famous by a few watches, the IWC Mark 11. They were a Royal Air Force. They were popular with pilots from the Royal Air Force. But turn this watch over, and you have something incredible, a Christmas watch. Major T.G. Brown, December 25th, 1940, Edmonton Fusiliers. There is no epic story associated with the Edmonton Fusiliers. They were activated on August 26, 1939, for local protection duties. I guess if the war did reach, at this time, 39 and so forth, Britain was already 40 too. 39, 40, Britain was in the thick of it already, part of the Crown. Maybe the war could have reached Canada. So they were activated to do local protection duties, but then they were taken off those details on December 31st, 1940. So the Christmas gift to this guy was this watch, and then that he was taking off those details. No information on T.G. Brown. Again, Canadian watches, I got lucky with that one because he was kind of a national or local hero. But the access to archives and so forth are different. The next watch that we were working on here is this Belmar. Again, Roman numerals, which is very interesting. This one, unfortunately, incredibly a universal last name, Todd. You're not going very far with that. We do know, we have a date here, which is after World War II, 46. That he was part of the 32nd Infantry Division. That was the Red Arrow Division. And they were actually very active in New Guinea. And they did get in a number of firefights there and so forth. But super general last name, no service number, a random date, and 32nd Infantry Division was massive. So this one's going to take, this one is like Minesweeper. You just get lucky when you look through all the documents. So right before this talk, Saturday, the guy that I bought all these watches from lives in rural Pennsylvania. He's a retired high school history teacher, and he sets aside watches for me. So I told him I was doing this, wanted to fact check a bunch of things, and also he emailed me and said he found another one for me, which yeah, done. Give it to me, I'll take it. So I met him, sat down with him, and went over a few things, and he presented the watch to me. It was this guy, another active service watch. So we saw that from the last one. The A.C. Jones watch was also an active service watch. This one, interesting, high quality. ANSI magnetic, shock and waterproof. But what the most interesting thing here is the case back engraving. So I didn't have time to really dig into this one because it just came to me. But I did find one little nugget which can start the search. So, Royal Canadian Air Force and a service number. So you have two things which narrow the search down, which really help. But what happened was he popped up in a book. So Google Scholar popped up in a book about remembering the Lancaster bomber, which is an icon for Commonwealth forces. Avro Lancaster, it was a night bomber, and they were also built in Ontario under license. But they used, again, like back to the original, that P-51 from the beginning, the Packard-built Merlin engines. So there's the Canadian Lancaster with the Packard Merlins, then there's obviously the English Lancaster. But our boy's name shows up right here. J.R. McDowell, F.E. F.E. is a flight engineer. So they're not the pilot. So again, sergeant. Usually pilots are lieutenants and so forth. Not always, but sergeant, flight engineer. So he's responsible for monitoring exhaust gas temperatures, keeping fuel balanced in the wings, making sure fuel pressure is what it should be and so forth. So if this is him, which we need to cross-check and confirm, that's interesting because Lancaster was involved in a ton of stuff. I mean, it's like our B-29. It did dam busters, like a night raid on dams where it dropped a bomb that skipped along and pounded against German dams to help destroy the infrastructure. And it's just absolutely iconic. Has anyone seen one here? 2 or 3, 4 people. Again, they're incredibly majestic. They're massive. And you have 4 Merlin engines humming at full tilt. And they're also incredibly maneuverable for their size. So Lancaster bomber, if it's true that he was a flight engineer on a Lancaster bomber, there's something there. So there's more digging to be done with this one. Probably won't give this talk at HSNY again, but you can look. I will write something on HODINKEE about the what ends up becoming of this watch for sure. So kind of understand the rationale behind the search, and hopefully you are excited about World War II watches, and the journey of discovering things excites you as much as it does me. So I thought it would be interesting to kind of look into how you can do this too. What are the tools? I mean, we think about the stories. I mean, you get this random watch, one of these guys right here, and all of a sudden you discover it was involved with nuclear tests, this, that, the other thing. How can you pick up a watch, or even look at your own watches? There are a few resources to use. So this is what I had to do for all of them. What you do is you use the service number to determine what branch it was. If the branch isn't listed already, USN, Navy, Army, whatever, 32nd Infantry, we know he's Army. So first thing is the NARA. These guys have all records, but there was a fire at some point in history, and it wiped out a lot of the records. But they do, if you give them longer time, they can duplicate some for you and give them to you. In addition, if he's Air Force, or she, of course, there was a WASP, or Women's Air Force, Air Service, you can check out the Air Force Historical Research Agency. These guys help. So at this address, so you can also just email me. It's Cole@HODINKEE if you want to know how to do this, and I can write it out in detail. But you go here, email a few people, and you start to work with them. They're here to help. So Army Heritage, one of these is over in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. Marine Corps, Navy, and then Veterans Affairs. So that's how you find the tombstone. And the tombstone can also retroactively help you see where they served. In addition, kind of the way that we're all pretty intuitively familiar with, plug their name into Google. That's the first thing. And a lot can happen there. Google Books, Google Scholar, going to the library. So that Russian war relief story was put together simply by going to the New York Public Library. I think this is also part of that system too. But going there, and since it was headquartered here, all of the Russian war relief documents were still here at the NYPL. Ancestry.com. Have to pay, but it's definitely worth it. Also, just for your own curiosity, you can see some crazy things that you wouldn't expect otherwise. Fold 3 is military records. That's a privatized database that's searchable. And they have stuff that would take a long time to get through the other channels, the official channels. Facebook and Instagram. So I found Pat Fullenkamp, and I've been chatting with him. He is helping me find the relative that's the next of kin to George Christopher Fullenkamp. I found him on Facebook. And he read the article, and we connected and so forth. So we've been actually going through his family tree and matching up all the locations and so forth to find out who should this watch go back to. And Instagram, too. Believe it or not, like We're Into Watches, these deep niche appreciation groups they're there for everything. So like the Marblehead has a huge following. The Telemann has a huge following. So that's how you can go about doing this. Again, just get in touch with me, and I can help you do it too. But this all started from some random air show out in Reading, Pennsylvania, and we've gotten this far with it. And I think to kind of conclude this is these watches, yes, they're watches and so forth, and that's why we're here. This talk wasn't really about, the mechanics or the movements or this and that. It was just how a watch transcends this little wrist instrument that keeps time. And in the metal, there's pain, suffering, sacrifice, but there's also triumph, courage, victory, and it's all there. It's literally in the metal. Every watch with a caseback inscription has a story to tell, but we just have to listen and do the requisite research. And that's it. That's where we're at. So those are the stories of the men and women too in general who fought and died potentially for our country and so forth. And the crazy thing to think is that those stories would not be told ever. We're sitting here, all of us are sitting here listening to the story of Waldo Croner, Fullenkamp. Would they be told again if it weren't for a watch from a little air show? Probably not. And I think that's the most important thing about this project. So, hope y'all enjoyed it.
All right, if anyone has any questions for Cole, please raise your hand and I'll bring the microphone to you. We'll start here with Melody.
Hello, Cole.
Hey there.
The person who showed you all his watch collections.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, do you know what plans he has for those watches?
To sell them, make money. That's it.
Okay.
He is literally a dealer. So
Yeah.
he goes around the country to these World War II events and sells watches to people.
And what if, like, say, there's a surplus and, you know, if he passes on?
Yeah, which
What-
is likely soon.
Yeah. Oh, so
Yeah.
what will happen to the watches?
Hard to. How do you go about kind of approaching that subject? I don't know. Likely, I mean, hopefully, maybe one day I'll go there. When I get a nice, when I strike it rich from writing about watches, I'll go there and I'll buy his entire collection. But otherwise, I don't know what will happen, to be honest. Hopefully, he sells them. And hopefully they get into the hands of the people who care about them, who are the reenactors. But hopefully now maybe you guys are inspired to as well. Who knows? Sure.
So I'm afraid it's probably a non sequitur, and it might also be the subject for a novel rather than the kind of historical work that you've done. But it's almost as interesting to imagine how those watches came to travel
Yes.
to where you were able to find them.
Yeah. I thought a lot about that too. And I've asked the guy who sold them to me where he finds them. He finds them at estate sales. He doesn't use eBay, which is kind of crazy, but he amassed his collection in the pre-eBay days and is slowly selling it off. And I asked him where they came from. He said mostly estate sales, and then once he became known in the community, people would just sell him the watches. So yeah, that is fascinating. Another watch I found, I told the story earlier, but I found an Alpina, which is a German watch, engraved with an American soldier's name and serial number. So I imagine that must have either been snatched off the wrist of someone who had been defeated or bought during occupied Germany. And I would think like a German watch made it back here on the wrist of a soldier, and then maybe the other thing is too, people just, like I said, they just don't care about these watches, really. We do, and we see the value, but generally not really. If someone passes on and it's in their sock drawer, what's it to them, you know? They'll just get rid of it. So maybe that's how they come about. I don't know exactly how they came into his possession and then into my possession, but that is incredibly interesting.
Any other questions? Questions for Cole? All right. Let's give
Thank you all.
Let's give Cole another round of applause. That was amazing.
Thank you. They can come and check it out.
Yes, absolutely. So Cole's going to be available afterwards. He's got lots of watches up here. He's got the watches that he talked about. You're welcome to come up and take a look, take a selfie with Cole, get his autograph if you'd like. He's here for you. And before we wrap up tonight, I'd like to announce the lecturer for next month. It is Mr. Francois-Paul Journe and Osama Sendi, and they are both going to be lecturing on resonance in horology. So I want to ask a question here. How many people in the audience are members? Just raise your hand. So quite a few. Thank you. This is amazing. The reason I mention that is because I'm certain that next month's lecture is going to sell out very quickly. So if you are not a member, I encourage you to please sign up. Members get priority access to all tickets for our events. And if you are a member, thank you for your ongoing support. It's really only with your support that we're able to put on events like we did tonight and like we're going to do next month with Mr. Journe and Mr. Sendi. It's going to be an event to remember. It's going to be a lecture to remember. So thank you all for coming tonight. We'll see everyone March 2nd. Have a great night.